Hello, Oddities. Welcome back to another episode of Midnight Curiosities. I'm Curator Raquel.
And I'm Curator Warbeauty.
Coming at you live from a bird's nest in a tree.
It's kind of cold for that, don't you think?
Nah, it's fine. I mean, okay, well, here where we are, it's snowing, but it's probably not snowing everywhere.
Okay, maybe people south of the equator.
You don't know where my bird's nest in a tree is.
That's
it could be
true.
South of the equator. I didn't say where it is.
That's true.
I'm not just hanging out outside my own house.
Well, that's true. Could be an African swallow.
I could be. Yeah, you don't know.
No, that's non-migratory. Ha ha ha. Monty Python references.
So yeah, I mean, it's been snowing here, and it kind of sucks. I personally hate the snow.
I also hate the snow.
Oh, good. I'm glad we're on the same page about that.
So I'm from the desert. I'm from Southern California, and
right where it doesn't snow.
Where the snow is, that's not a real thing.
I'm from Southern Mississippi, where the snow is also not a thing that happens at all.
And here we are in the D.C. area of Virginia.
And it sucks.
And there's ice here. Can you believe that?
It's funny because this isn't a part of the country that people generally say, like, oh, it snows a lot. Because, you know, you can ask Native Virginians and they'll say, you know, it doesn't snow a whole lot or the snow's not that bad. But from where we come from, this is horrible.
This is terrible. I would never survive.
Awful.
Like, if you go to, like,
Right.
northern and western New York, where they get, like, 10 feet of snow, and they're just like, oh, it's just a Wednesday, I would literally just die.
I would die. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds apprehensible at best.
Right, so if you live somewhere where it snows a lot like that, leave us some hate mail about how weak we are.
Yeah. Why do you keep asking for hate mail?
Because no one wants to give us love mail, so, you know.
No one wants to give us hate mail either.
Just somebody give us mail. We're so lonely. It's almost Valentine's Day.
Oh, it is almost Valentine's Day. Do you have any plans for Valentine's Day?
I do. I have a Valentine. I have several. So I got to make time for all my Valentines.
Aw.
No, but it's interesting because I don't know if you guys know the story of Valentine. Saint Valentine.
Wasn't it St. Valentine's Massacre?
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
So we're celebrating a love holiday when a lot of people died.
Yes. I am familiar because I love massacres.
Right.
But you could educate the audience if you wanted to.
I don't know if I want to get into Valentine today, but just know that that's happening.
You know, that should have been this week's episode, now that I think about it.
About the St. Valentine's Day Massacre and how he drove all the snakes out of Europe, all the pagans.
Right, well, this episode's going up the day after Valentine's Day, I think.
Well, if you're a pagan and you're in Europe, then I'm sorry that you got driven out, and we celebrate that as a holiday.
Yeah, but we love you.
Because we're pagans in America. But it's cool.
And because it's
we're also holiday. Currently being driven out of America, so that's...
Oh, snap. Hot takes. Okay. Well, you know, we didn't pick that one for our episode topic this week. So, what are we talking about this week?
We are talking about omens.
Ooh, omens. It's like, every time I think of omens, I think you're going to make fun of me for this, but I think about, in Anastasia, the movie or musical.
Okay.
You know that song in Journey to the Past where she's like standing in the snow and she's like, God, just give me a sign, please. And then the little dog shows up.
That's technically an omen. Not where I thought you were going to go with this, but okay.
Are there different omens in Anastasia?
There are.
Well, yeah, with all like the dark magics and stuff, I'm sure.
Well, I guess we should talk about, you know, what is an omen?
Sure, we could talk about what is an omen. I think in the most basic definition, an omen is a prophetic sign or some sort of symbol that you could read into as direction for your life, something like that.
Right. So the official kind of definition from Wikipedia is an omen is a phenomena that is believed to foretell the future, often signifying the advent of change. It was commonly believed in ancient times and is still believed by some today that omens bring divine messages from the gods.
Okay, I'm into that.
If we had spooky music, I'd put it in here.
Do you want me to add some spooky music to this one?
Just like
There you go. Add your own spooky music. Okay, so I think that an omen is fairly self-explanatory. It is what it is, and that is a sign. So
Right.
I kind of wanted to get into a little bit about who believes in omens and kind of how frequent are omens, who sees omens more than other people, that kind of thing.
Sure. So, omens, I mean, what can you really say about them other than they're swell stuff?
Well, we have to have enough to say to fill a whole episode.
Well, no, okay, so omens, the omens are tricky. Let me just put it this way. Because everybody sees omens. You know, your great Aunt Carol, who is like
Yes.
weirdly spiritual, but maybe not quite religious, she sees omens in her peanut butter every day.
Of course. And I love that for her.
Okay. So you have your great Aunt Carol, who's not necessarily religious, but she's super spiritual, and she sees omens in like her peanut butter every day.
Uh-huh.
But then you have your super ultra religious mom,
Okay.
Kathy. I don't know, Kathy and Carol just seem like
Okay.
omen kind of
Okay,
ladies.
sure. They see omens everywhere. Sure. I think the interesting thing about omens is that a lot of people see them when they are religious. A lot of religious people associate them to like divinity. But also a lot of non-religious people believe in signs from the universe or things like that, which I think is pretty cool.
Oh, right. We're going to get into that. So, one of the things that most commonly people who see omens are going to be your more spiritual religious folk. And of course, any religion, you're going to have omens. You know, if you say a prayer of any kind, they're going to be like, oh, you know, send me a sign. And then they drive past a McDonald's that has one of those like interchanging neon signs, and it's got a quote from their favorite author to sell McChickens. They're gonna take that as an omen. I don't want to say mistake it as an omen, but they're gonna
Perceive it.
they're gonna be looking. Yeah, they're gonna perceive it, and they're gonna be looking for the universe to communicate.
That's interesting. I personally have never asked for a sign because the deity that I worked with primarily for a long time, I didn't really want the kind of sign that he was offering.
You didn't want that kind of message.
Yeah, I didn't want that kind of message in my life.
I look for affirmations personally. I don't look for necessarily signs. I just look for affirmations that I am pleasing my deities.
Sure. So we kind of talked about how people that are religious and people that are not religious both alike believe in omens. So I kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Right. So if you believe in any kind of cosmic signal from the universe, you probably believe in omens. So believing in omens is really, really, really ancient. And it is a societal and cultural practice that spans every society and every culture since probably the dawn of consciousness, if we go back that far. And so you have this instinctual looking for messages, looking for patterns, looking for symbols, signs, whatever. And even people who do not believe in deities and who are not spiritual and who are not religious still take omens because it's just such a deep part of our DNA at this point, and such a part of our society's DNA.
I would agree with that. I think it's interesting because, you know, even if you're not consciously looking for omens, a lot of people will often find something that, like you said, affirms what they are doing, and they will just instinctively take it as this is a sign that I didn't even know I was looking for.
Exactly. We're constantly looking for messages and for little patterns and symbols, and that's just being a human. And so
Right.
It's easy for religious and spiritual folk to translate that into, oh, that's from the universe, or that's from my God, or whatever you believe it's from. But for non-religious
Right.
folk, you know, one thing I think is really funny, and reactions they often have are like, oh, that's so spooky. It's also called, to some extent, like synchronicity also extends into omens.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Right.
Get
And
behind
people
that.
get so surprised and they're just like, oh my gosh, that's so
Yeah, and coincidence.
right. What a weird coinky dink.
Right. So, how often? I know that it depends on the person and the circumstance of how frequently people receive omens, because I know some people would view them as incredibly rare and powerful symbols from the gods, but other people get affirmations about what they're doing 20 times a day. So, I kind of wanted. Is there a reason for that?
So once you start seeing omens and symbols, it's really easy to continuously see them. You know, there's so many data points that are random, and it's easy to draw connections and tenuous connections between total coincidence and things that are actual omens. So
That's where discernment comes in.
this is where discernment plays a huge part. So like you go through your day, for example, and you see you see on a billboard some sort of quote that just is everything you needed to hear right then and there.
Right.
And that's probably a coincidence. But if you come home and there's, you know, a dead animal in your yard, well, that could be an omen. It could also be a coincidence. You have to use discernment.
It could be. Sure. So that was an oddly specific example. Go ahead.
It was no okay. So recently, the curators have been trying to manifest certain changes in their lives,
Yes, we have.
and when I say dead animal, I don't mean like a raccoon or a possum. Chances are those are totally coincidental. But when you come home and there's a dead bat in your yard, in an area where we get bats, but it's not like a
Right.
problem, that's probably an omen.
Right.
Especially because bats do have metaphysical significance behind them. So if you come home and there's, you know, a dead deer in your yard, and that's not like a common
Right.
occurrence, it's probably an omen.
Right. So yeah, we did receive that, and we all accepted it as an omen. That's how we chose to perceive it.
Right. Ancient man, and because I won't even say ancient because it really wasn't all that long ago when seeing ravens or seeing owls was perceived as certain types of omen.
I mean, sometimes it still is.
Right.
I don't want to say that omens are always going to be a dead animal at your doorstep. It's not always going to be something super obvious that's in your face. You know, sometimes omens are very minuscule and minute, and a lot of people won't pick up on them a lot of the time. I think that discernment plays a huge factor into when you're receiving an omen and when you're not. But also, I think that a lot of times they're missed out on.
Right. That's actually really interesting you say that because omens are typically, they can be big grand things, and if you're going through significant change or there's going to be or have been death or some sort of trauma or some sort of upheaval of something, the omens are typically pretty large. But there could be minute things that are omens as well. And I think a lot of people, so I see these posts all the time on social media, and this really kills me, is that everyone's like, oh, just listen to the universe and the universe will speak to you.
Oh boy, the universe speaks a different language than we do.
It certainly does. And that's why I'm just like, when you prime people to think that the universe is going to be speaking to them in really small ways, they're going to start looking for messages everywhere. I mean, it kind of borders on paranoia.
It does, and it's unfortunate because sometimes those people will pick up messages where there are none.
Right.
Because they are either desperate or they have been trained to do so. And that's where, I mean, it gets kind of dangerous, you know? I've always... Okay, here's my hot take on omens.
I'm ready. Lay it on me.
I have always believed that it is incredibly, arrogant to assume that the universe is giving messages to me directly. I don't feel like individual humans are of such importance. But at the same time, I know that sometimes our deities or the universe does direct certain people into certain situations. But I've always kind of had a more critical eye to omens because I've just felt like, we aren't that important. The gods are not speaking to us directly, and we're just inflating our sense of self-worth.
That's a really interesting take, because that's actually, there are two theories out there on it. You have, well, I guess there's more than two, but there's like kind of two prevalent theories. You have a theory that is the one you just said, where, you know, the universe doesn't talk to us. There's a lot of practitioners out there, metaphysical, magical, religious, who
of course
do not believe that the gods speak to individual humans. That it's just, that's our own arrogance getting in the way.
Right. Like, I feel like the gods are busy doing their own thing and being literal gods, that I don't see why they would take the time out of their day to pinpoint one specific person and direct their choices and stuff. Like, that just seems so outlandish to me.
I fall in the other school of thought. So I fall in this. Yeah,
I could tell.
Well, no, it's really interesting to me that people have that thought process, because I fall in the other school of thought, where I do believe that individuals can receive omens, because I believe that individuals can communicate directly with the divine with no middleman. Now, that doesn't come with, that's not like I'm not going to be like, oh, pick up the phone and be like, oh, hey, Frank, how you doing? How's the goddess wife?
Oh, yes, our divine overlord, yes. Frank.
You know, hey, I heard that your 3-headed dog was having some trouble, you know? Want to catch a beer later? Like, I clearly don't know how to have conversations, but...
Sure.
I personally am of the school of thought that anyone can receive omens, because anyone can communicate with the divine. But it does take quite a bit of skill and discipline and discernment to be able to tell what is.
It's interesting because you're also of the belief that everything's a sign from your gods.
Yes. I'm also, though, for those who, if you haven't caught on by now, I'm actually a hyper-religious, hyper-spiritual person. And yeah, I'm essentially very monk mentality. Everything I do is in the glorification and in the names of my deities, of my belief, of my spirituality.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't do things because I view them in a secular way. I do them because I view them as part of a greater cosmological divine situation.
I think I did believe in omens, and I think I'm getting to that point again where I believe that there are signs from the universe that I should or shouldn't do something. But for a while I got super burnt out about it, because I was in a community where I was dealing with a lot of inexperienced people and a lot of young, new, like, religious people or spiritual people. And it got to the point where when I was working with my deity specifically, everybody was posting, like, every single thing that happened to them, like, is this a sign? Is this a sign? Was this my deity? And it's like, first of all, don't ask the internet, because the internet cannot decide that for you, ever. It's you and your situation, and it's not something that anyone else can decide for you. But also, like, if you're asking everyone else if it's a sign, it's probably not a sign.
Yeah, signs definitely come with some amount of intuition. Omens come with some amount of intuition, and you'll know based off of things going on in your life and questions you kind of put out into the ether. You'll know if it comes back, because if you get like, let's say the dead bat, for example. If a bat had just died in our yard and we were literally not doing anything, we weren't changing anything, there weren't like anything that needed to be happen, could it still be an omen? Absolutely. The likelihood of it being an omen, though, if I just looked at that bat and was super confused, that it's likely more coincidence.
Right. I think a lot of it also depends on how you interpret it. If you had looked at it and you hadn't said that's a metaphysical omen, then it would have just been a dead bat, and we would have moved on.
And we would have named it Avocado.
I tried to name it Avocado.
We didn't name the bat Avocado. We actually haven't named the bat yet, but Avocado is not the name.
Personally, I'm a big fan of Tegan.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it.
Anyway, you don't have to name your omens.
It's true.
But yeah, I think that omens are tricky because they tend to come at times when you need them and when you want them the most. but at the same time, that's when you're also most desperately going to pick up on something that is not an omen and interpret it as such.
Right.
So they're tricky, and you have to use a lot of discernment, and you have to use a lot of intuition, because ultimately, if you believe that it's a sign, then it's a sign. I think
that does hold some weight behind it. So as you guys know, that like a lot of this is intention and will. So if you believe it's a sign, even if it wasn't, you create significance where none was, which then assigns that thing significance. So now it is significant.
Right. And then you can even get more convoluted than that and say that because you construed it as a sign and it became a sign, then that was what the sign was supposed to be all along.
Yeah, omens they're tricky things. And they're not always bad things either. A lot of omens are actually neutral to good, I would say.
That is a great point. I think omens do tend to have a negative connotation to them. And I think Hollywood does that a disservice, as we talk about so frequently.
Right. Again, omens is something that suffers from the Hollywood lens disease, because so many people are like, oh, it's dark and spooky and it's this mystical other thing. But
well, not only that, but even in film and movies and media, like, it's created as, oh, that was an omen and we should have known that was happening. And it tends to be a cop-out for foreshadowing, is to just use an omen. It's lazy writing, in my opinion. More hot takes.
Curator Raquel coming for Hollywood.
Yeah, I think that foreshadowing can be done a lot better than just throwing in a raven somewhere and saying that you should have known that was foreshadowing.
Should have known.
Should have written it better. So yeah, like we said, not all omens are bad omens. They tend to get this kind of scary lens to them, this film over them, that can be misconstrued as a negative thing. And I think if you receive a neutral omen and you choose to perceive it in a negative way, then congrats, you've got yourself a negative omen.
Yeah, that's true, because perception is reality, as you may or may not know, audience viewers.
It truly is. And I think more often than not, omens are neutral. I don't think the universe is ever going to sit something in front of you that says you must take this job and then buy this house and then marry this person. It's never going to be that straightforward and that, positive. It's going to be, honestly, I feel like most omens are saying you have a choice. Here's a sign that you have a choice, and it's always been your choice.
Sometimes, but I do think that there are omens that come with predetermined connotations based in historical belief. So, certain animals, for example, they're going to have certain overarching concepts associated with them, like, oh, well, this means, change is coming. And it doesn't mean good or bad change, it just means change.
Sure. I agree with that. But, I mean, in the same vein as you're speaking of the dead bat, it could mean change is coming, but a lot of people would look at that, a dead bat at your doorstep, and say, oh, death is coming. Or, like, this house is marked for death. Dun, dun, dun.
Right, but that's actually not what the bat signifies. So that's another thing, too, is dead animals. Let's talk about that as an omen. So many people think that animals, or specifically dead animals, is a signifier of death. That's just not true. The bat does not signify death at all. Actually, the bat signifies change, and the bat signifies death in a metaphysical sense, in the sense of a turnover. You're turning over a new leaf.
Yeah. What other kind of omens do you think people can get other than dead bats? Because I think that, discernment is a hard part of it, and knowing what could be a sign is pretty difficult.
Well, here's one of the biggest arguments I see, is that omens are typically given to us by the universe in the form of nature. So think trees, think water, think wind, the elements, think animals. But I'm going to offer a hot take counter argument.
I'm glad you're doing it instead of me, because I was thinking of a hot take counter argument.
Here's a hot take counter argument, is that we are progressively a less natural society as we progress into the tech era and have our cities grow and our populations grow. Not that those things don't exist, but I make this argument for religion and deities all the time is why would they not evolve to give us omens in a way our minds would understand? So why couldn't we get omens that were, neon billboards?
Do you think I should talk about the signs that I got from Loki?
Sure.
Since they were very technological. Yeah. Okay. So when I first got into paganism and heathenry specifically, I dedicated myself to, I practiced most specifically on the Norse god Loki. And I did not find Loki of my own volition. Loki found me. And that took a long time for me to accept because I'm not that important. But I went to sleep one night and I had thought about religion in general, but I didn't have a direction. I just knew that I was dissatisfied with Christianity and I felt like there was something else out there. So I went to sleep and my phone was in my car. And so I woke up the next day and I went to go check my phone and I had maybe 60 tabs open on my phone on my internet browser, and all of them were searches for Loki and heathenry and Loki mythology and all kinds of things like that. And as I was closing out all of them, because there was so many of them, I would gather snippets that I would see as I was closing them, and eventually that led me to have a curiosity that led me to research more and eventually build a relationship with Loki. But that was an omen that there was no avoiding. There was no not noticing that one, because it was a technological one that wasn't nature based, but also
I do know. It's so that's what I'm saying is I think that gods would have evolved with our understanding and the way we interact and perceive our modern day. So exactly, having 60 browser tabs open with this particular god's name and all kinds of searches.
Right, because I hadn't done that. I wasn't even near my phone that day. And I, had heard of the deity, but I had never heard a lot about him in a mythological or religious viewpoint.
Right.
So it really caught me off guard, but that's an instance in which I wasn't looking for an omen, but I found myself in the midst of one.
Absolutely. And omens are, being metaphysical, prophetic events, kind of, or signs. They're gonna mess with technology. And that's something I think that we need to evolve past this sort of, and I'm going to use this word, hot take lingo. We have this sort of caveman brain about it because we think, oh, well, the ravens and my ancestors saw
like a full
owls and doves and carrier pigeons. We aren't going to see those things. We're going to see technology be messed with. It could be an omen if your appliances stop working at certain times of day. It could be an omen if your TV always changes to like an in-between channel every time you try to watch something specific. That's electrical interference is big metaphysical energy.
I agree with that, and something to consider with like if your TV keeps changing to a specific channel or something, like what is that channel? What's the channel number? What's the significance of that number? Like there's so many things that you can look into.
Yeah, and omens are never going to be so easy as just like, oh, well, this makes total sense. I mean, look at all the minute details, like look at the time of day, look at the numbers, look at the location, what kind of feelings, what happened before, what happened after. You kind of have to consider all of these things.
Right. And I do want to say that since I have and do worship Loki, a lot of people have a bad habit of, since he is a trickster deity, they tend to blame any sort of electrical malfunctions or any sort of wonky behavior that happens around them. They tend to be like, oh, that's Loki being Loki. And it's like, well, sometimes yes, but sometimes no.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult when you're working with more trickster and chaotic deities to
Yes, it is.
have a definitive say because, yeah, everyone tends to be like, oh, well, it's, it's Loki or it's this god or goddess or whatever. And the reality is life is chaos and you're going to
Yes.
find patterns in chaos no matter how chaotic.
Right. That's just human nature.
Right.
Is that all?
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us this week. This has been Midnight Curiosities. Midnight Curiosities is hosted by One Eye Oddities, a new way to see magic. I don't think we have any new reviews this week. So if you like what we do here, please leave us a review. Tell your friends about it. Start up a discussion with your friends about maybe some signs that you've seen or omens that you're considering, and don't be afraid to have those discussions. I think that they're healthy. I think that they'll help build kind of the message that we're trying to send here. It's just like metaphysics is in everything that we do, and that doesn't make you weird. It's not different. It's incredibly, incredibly normal and commonplace. So yeah, talk to your friends about it. Tell them to come listen to us, and we'll talk to your friends about it.
Yeah, we'll tell your friends all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, I think that's it for us this week. We don't have any new reviews. Nobody to thank. No love to share. For those of you that celebrate it, I hope you guys have a happy Valentine's Day. And yeah, I am Curator Raquel.
And I'm Curator War Beauty.
And as always, don't forget to
become an oddity.